Hi, my name's Peter Eales, and I'm an executive IT architect within IBM's DevOps Global Tiger team. What I'd like to talk to you about today are the various capabilities that we have within our cloud software portfolio. So many of the clients I work with are very focused on how they optimize their current IT landscape, and that's very much about being faster, cheaper, and better. So faster relates to improved productivity, cheaper relates to reduced cost, and better relates to improvements in quality. But for many organizations, that simply will just keep the lights on, but will not take them to a place where they can grow market share, for example. So moving to a place where they can innovate and produce innovative products which capture the market is something that's of great interest to them. And against that backdrop, what we find is the need to support something called multi-speed IT. So many solutions actually comprise two distinctly different elements. The first element is what we would call the industrialized core, and those elements are relatively stable. And if I think about a bank, for example, that may represent something like a payments, the core banking platform and the payment system that sits within it. And that's relatively stable. On the other hand, some of the more innovative solutions, so maybe a bank has a digital initiative which is very much focused on how you provide support for mobile devices and the apps that sit on them, sit more in the innovation area. And that's what we call the innovation edge. And these two areas, the industrialized core and innovation edge, need to talk to each other. So there is clearly an interface between them. So for example, a mobile banking app will need to access information that actually comes from the back-end core banking platform, maybe in terms of the payments that a client is looking to see on their mobile app. Now, what I'm going to walk you through to try and make sense of the different capabilities that IBM has to offer are 5 themes in which we can consider those capabilities. And those 5 themes are mobile, integration, DevOps, hybrid cloud, and then finally, digital innovation platform. So starting with mobile, one of the challenges that many organizations have is they need to support different kinds of device, whether it's a smartphone, whether it's a tablet, a smartwatch, and other wearables. Not only that, but they also need to support different versions of those devices. And a further complexity is that those devices may need to support different operating systems. So for example, you may have iOS for Apple devices and Android for some others and other operating systems. Now, one of the complexities you have there is that both the devices and the operating systems on them come in different versions. So managing the complexity of all of those different variations of device and operating system really requires you to have a platform that helps you deliver your apps to those different devices and really have a platform that controls the way you develop your mobile solutions. Not only that, but the mobile platform itself may have capabilities that allow you to do things such as mobile testing and have specific capabilities around things like vulnerability analysis, because clearly security is a big issue with mobile devices, and sentiment analysis, for example. So trying to get an understanding of what gestures your users are performing and maybe correlate that with feedback on an app store in order to gauge the sentiment. So the mobile platform as a capability allows you to do all of those things. So that's our first theme, mobile. The second theme is focused on integration. So I mentioned earlier that the mobile devices, for example, that sit on the innovation edge need to interact with the more stable capabilities that sit in the industrialized core through an interface. So the whole concept of integration from an IT perspective is clearly very important. And as organizations move more and more into the deployment of their solutions on the cloud, then the concept of APIs in terms of the interface between the different elements becomes really important. And the capability of API management and how you manage those interfaces is also something that needs to be supported. And we also shouldn't forget our traditional integration technologies with which we may be fairly familiar. So for example, from an IBM perspective, we have things like MQ series, which provides a queuing mechanism between different elements of a solution. And of course, there are other integration technologies as well, such as an enterprise service bus, for example. And finally, in terms of the integration theme, there's also integration from a business perspective. So how do you actually integrate areas of the business? And is there any business process automation that's required to support that? So process automation is also something that we can consider in the integration space. So that's the second theme, integration. So the third theme is DevOps. So we talked a minute ago about the creation of more innovative solutions, potentially deployed onto mobile devices. And one of the difficulties with such an innovation initiative is that it's not always possible to easily derive the requirements up front for what our mobile apps may need to look like. The only way we can really understand what the final solution should be is by rapidly deploying increments of our solution to candidate end users to get their feedback and understand how we can refine the solution so that it actually is fit for purpose when it's finally released to the big wide world and into production. So the ability to be able to iterate as quickly as possible is extremely important. Now, DevOps, in IBM's terms, is very much about how do we get from an idea into production as quickly as possible, and how can we streamline that DevOps pipeline. So DevOps to IBM is much more than simply connecting development and operations. It really is about that end-to-end pipeline. Now, whilst there are some familiar capabilities that sit within that pipeline, such as the ability to define and manage requirements, the ability to write code, to create designs, to do functional testing, for example, there are certain capabilities that really help drive a continuous delivery pipeline. So the first capability I'd like to focus on in terms of the DevOps theme is something called shift-left testing. So one of the challenges that a development organization often has is getting access to the external systems that their solutions may depend upon while they're developing some new capability themselves. So one of the challenges that causes is delays in delivery, because they need to wait for the provisioning of an appropriate environment that they can then use to access those external systems. And the external systems themselves may not be available, or themselves may need to be updated for some reason. What the shift-left testing capability does is it allows you to stub out access to such external systems so that development teams can continue to develop their piece of the overall solution, but actually interact with the stubs. So it then doesn't result in any delays to the development work. Shift-left testing is sometimes known as service virtualization as well. So the second capability I'd like to mention is the concept of automated deployment. So one of the challenges that many organizations have is the fact that they manually deploy their solutions into the different environments that may exist. And this can result in both delays because it's a manual task, but also errors because it can be error-prone. So the concept of automated deployment is really to, as it says, automate the deployment of solutions into the various environments. And that can actually be quite complex. So many organizations have different environments into which they want to deploy their solutions. It could be a development environment, a test environment, an SIT environment for integration, a staging environment, and then finally a production environment. So the automated deployment capability really allows you to produce consistent and repeatable deployments into each of those environments. So the final DevOps capability I'd like to mention is something called application performance monitoring. So once our solutions do get into production, what we need to do is assure that they are actually fit for purpose. And so the application performance monitoring capability allows you to determine just how effective our applications are once they are in production and take any necessary steps should they not be as required. So that covers mobile, integration, and DevOps. The fourth theme I'd like to talk about is hybrid cloud. So many organizations currently deploy their solutions today on what we call traditional IT. So that's hardware installed in their data centers. And the same organizations also have aspirations of moving elements of their IT landscape to the cloud. And in order to support that, they may also have created a dedicated on-premises capability, which is a private cloud that actually runs in their own data centers on their own infrastructure. They may also deploy elements of their IT landscape to a dedicated off-premises infrastructure, potentially hosted by a third party. And then finally, they may deploy elements of their IT landscape to something called a shared off-premises solution. Now, the reason that we have these different topologies is simply because an organization will deploy different elements of their IT landscape to one or more of these different topologies. And the decision as to which one to use is based on considerations such as workload and security. So, for example, I live in the UK, and the government has regulated that you cannot place citizen data outside of the UK, so that may constrain what you can actually do. So organisations may actually select one or more of these different topologies for different reasons. And this is why we call it hybrid cloud, because it really will be a mix of those different environments that are deployed to, based on considerations such as workload and security, as I mentioned. Now, in creating these different cloud environments, it's very important to be able to define, deploy, manage and retire the services that are offered by each of those cloud solutions. And that's what a cloud management capability provides for you. An organisation may also want to make use of different cloud vendors. And so the ability to choose between different vendors and their different cloud solutions is also important, and to deploy the right things to the right solution for the right reasons. And this is why we also have a cloud brokerage capability to help you make those decisions. And finally, wouldn't it be great if some of these capabilities themselves were available in the cloud? So one of the other capabilities we have is actually our fifth theme, something we call the Digital Innovation Platform. This not only allows you to access some of the services that I've mentioned in the cloud itself, so they become as-a-service offerings, but the platform itself, the Digital Innovation Platform, which in IBM is a product called Bluemix, also gives you access to a number of services that you can then bring into your solutions. And an example could be an insurance company that now has access to weather data, and maybe the insurance company insures vehicles. So by integrating the weather data service, an insurance company could be notified of any inclement weather that's occurring in certain areas, and if it's very severe, they could actually use another service to notify their clients that that weather's about to hit them in that area. So their clients, the owners of the vehicles, can put their vehicles under cover in order to avoid any damage. And that's of benefit to their clients, because obviously their vehicles aren't damaged, and it's of benefit to the insurance company because they'll have fewer claims to process. So in summary, that covers the 5 themes I wanted to discuss today. So they are mobile, integration, DevOps, hybrid cloud, and the Digital Innovation Platform, which in IBM is the Bluemix solution that we have. And a lot of our solutions are very much about driving consistency, repeatability and automation within the organizations we work with, and radically improving the way they deliver their solutions at speed to the market, thereby enabling them with their innovation agenda. Thanks for watching.